Good morning, everybody. This is Dave Zavislin, Nolte Associates CAD Manager. In today's session, we are going to look at the third session of the Civil 3D 2009 Introduction Training course on Basic Object Modeling. The syllabus for today is I'm going to start off with a brief overview discussing the various model components or the model objects available in Civil 3D, and then we'll look at specifics on how to create data or create objects in Civil 3D. And we're going to start with import from Land Desktop because hopefully everybody knows how to create alignments and profiles and surfaces in Land Desktop, and how can we take that data and migrate it forward into Civil 3D. Then in terms of basic object modeling, I'm going to look at four main components of Civil 3D, and we're going to see there's quite a lot more, but we're going to look at some surface modeling. I have some point and break line data that we're going to bring in. We'll look at sites, and then finish up with alignments and profiles. And hopefully I can get all this in within the hour here. All right. In the overview, a couple of things before I start on the PowerPoint. Some of the objectives I want to accomplish today is to have everybody be able to list all of the different model objects that are available in Civil 3D, and I have an outline here I'm going to go through in just a moment. I also wanted to focus on establishing drawing setup and styles. We're going to start off the demonstration today by creating a new drawing and kind of going through that workflow. We're going to look at then importing data from Land Desktop, basic object creation, and then the final objective for today is to kind of reinforce the understanding of the dynamic relationships between objects within our Civil 3D drawing. So starting off here, we're going to look at a listing of all of these Civil 3D model objects. And I've kind of broken the slides up into subcategories. So as I step through these, I've tried to group them into logical groups. This first slide I'm looking at here, these are more of the survey type objects. Bringing in field data, doing stakeout. We're going to have a point object, or what they call a COGO point, survey networks, and figures, which are the stringing objects. Figures in Civil 3D are three-dimensional objects, so we can create break line data out of them. We can edit them very much like a feature line in Civil 3D, which we'll don't get to in today's session, but they are the replacement for 3D polylines. Not mentioned in this because it's not saved in the drawing is Civil 3D does also create an external observation database file of all the survey observation data. But I'm kind of focusing this outline or this listing on objects that are within our drawing file. All right. Highlighted in orange is the word surfaces, mainly because that's one of the ones I'm going to show you today. So anything else we see in orange here are items I'm going to try to highlight today, just so you can identify the numbers and what's available. So we are going to look at some basic surface modeling, both from Land Desktop and also creating it from some survey data. We're going to look at sites just briefly, mainly just to introduce the concept of what a site is and explain how the objects within a site interact with each other. And a site can contain alignments, parcels, grading objects, and feature lines. And the way these work is all of these elements will interact with other elements within the same site. So we can use sites to kind of manage our data and control how these interactions take place. And we'll hopefully cover that in a little bit more detail as we progress today. All right, alignments themselves. Now, alignment in 2009 version of Civil 3D does not need to be within the site. They actually have a separate area in Prospector where I can create what are called siteless alignments. Most of my alignments now I create in that area, but an alignment has sub-objects with it, and those include profiles. We do existing ground profiles from surfaces. We can lay out profiles. We can do any number of profiles within a single alignment. We can generate sample lines along an alignment, which we can then use to create cross-sections, and then with volume calculations, things like that, we can then generate what are called mass haul lines or mass haul diagrams within our alignment area of Prospector. All right. Piping, we have two components within a pipe network, and those are the pipes themselves and then the structures that are the nodes in our pipe network. Don't have time to cover that today. That'll probably be a separate session explaining how those behave and interact with each other. Road design, we have corridor objects, which will take an assembly, which is a separate object, and apply that along with an alignment and a profile to generate a corridor. Assemblies are built from subassemblies, which are predefined objects that we can drag and drop and edit parameters to build up what our roadway cross-sections look like. So it's kind of like doing templates in Land Desktop, but you don't actually draw the template. You pick the components and you add values to their properties and create your models that way. All right. One of the last ones here, these aren't model objects, but these are view objects that we use to display our roadway, our alignments in profile view, and then we also have what are called section views, and these are actually objects as well. And today I'll take a few minutes and we'll look a little bit at the profile view and see how that is used to control the scale of our profile view, the vertical scale, and then also how the grid is applied and station values, and then which profiles are drawn within that view. Don't have time today, but then there's also a similar type object that are used when you create roadway cross-sections, and there are styles that control how these views behave. And then the last items that I have here are for the plan production tools, and that is called a view frame, which defines an area in plan view that will then create a viewport in a sheet. And then it can also have match lines on either end of that view to indicate what preceding or following sheets are in the series. So that's all the different objects. So let's focus a little bit specifically here now as we work our way through. One of the things we're going to see as we set up our drawing is that the objects themselves are created on layers. Two ways you could go about this. One is create everything on layer 0 and then require or rely totally on styles to control the display, or you can do the way we've kind of evolved over the past couple of years is we've come up with a multi-standard layer for the objects where we've come up with a layer prefix of --C3 indicating this is a Civil 3D object, and then we've just spelled out what the object is. So you can see in the example here, alignments are going to be on the C3-alignment layer. Corridors are going to be on the corridor, but then you also see I've applied a suffix here, and that will actually create a unique layer for each corridor model. We've done that for corridors, we've done it for feature lines, and for surfaces. And the reason we did this, we find it's nice when working in a real complex drawing, is to be able to actually freeze objects that you're not currently using, and it makes it a little bit easier to work with. So if I'm not working or I don't need to see a surface, I can freeze that object layer as opposed to applying different styles to it. So it just gives you some other alternatives to manage the display of your data. We still are going to use styles to control the display of the object. For like surface contours, we have a style that draws major and minor contours using the properties of the standard multi-layers. So those will we'll still use styles for that, but just kind of make you aware of what's going on behind the scenes here. All right, importing data from Land Desktop. There is a command in Civil 3D to import directly from a Land Desktop project, and we can bring in description keys, surfaces, alignments, and profiles. We can bring in parcels, and then you can also import pipe runs that will then convert those into pipe networks. Pipe runs are a little complicated because you have to have pipe and structure objects in your drawing that correspond to the nodes that you have in your pipe runs. So you need to make sure that everything is configured and set up correctly. Addition to these import functions, you can also import data through other means. I can convert land desktop point objects. So I can take a drawing from land desktop with land desktop points in it, open it in Civil 3D, and then there's a command on the points pull down to say convert these to land desktop, or not land desktop, excuse me, to convert them to Civil 3D Kogo points. We can also import Kogo point data using ASCII files, PNEZD files, or XYZ files, just like you do in land desktop. And then there's also the option to bring this data in via land XML. And this is not only useful for land desktop data, but I can also bring in data from other applications, such as inroads or some of the other civil engineering design software that's out there. So a great way to exchange data maybe with other consultants. All right, well, let's go over to our demonstration now. I do have a version of Catapult running here, and in the project I'm in, I'm going to start in my master folder, but I'm actually going to create a new drawing to kind of just work us through the process of how do I create drawings in Civil 3D, and then how do I set them up for working with various design components. I'm going to bring in from land desktop, I'm importing an existing surface model and some alignments. And I don't have a single template drawing. Well, I do have this all multi-styles, but I don't recommend using that one because it's a very large file. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the EXTO_I, so that's the Imperial Existing Topo template drawing, and that has all of the styles for doing existing surfaces and bringing in some of our survey point data. All right, so I'm going to come in, I'm going to create a new drawing. I'll just call it Lesson 3.1. NOLTI Standards is our Civil 3D drawings. We're going to use our master file naming scheme, and we're going to suffix them with a -C3 to indicate that they are Civil 3D drawings. So maybe I should do that here. So I'll put a -C3 on that, and then we'll create that new drawing. And I'm working today in Civil 3D 2009. I'm using the C3D 2009 profile. Wait a sec here while this loads up. Almost there. First time you launch Civil 3D on your workstation every day, it does take it an extra minute or two to load up. All right, so hopefully everybody remembers all the menus and the prospector and all the other different components to our workspace environment here for Civil 3D. So starting out now, I'm going to go to the Settings tab over here on my tool space, and I'm going to start and edit my drawing settings. So we'll kind of see what we got when we brought that template in. And I'm actually going to start on the first tab here. Units and zone, I want to establish my drawing units. Well, this drawing's already set up for feet. And I want to set my default scale, and this is used to display objects in model space. And I want to pick a scale that's going to be close to what my sheet drawings are, so I know that as I work and annotate in model space, this is what it's going to look like when I plot it. All right. Transformation settings, we're not using that because we did not identify a coordinate projection. Object layers, here's where we've set up all of the different layers for all the various objects that are created in Civil 3D. And if you use the template drawings, these will already be populated for you. We've set most of the TX layers up to be green so that if you do have text on those layers, they will plot with a green color using the appropriate 0.35 pen and the Palette A CTB file there. Abbreviations we've looked at a couple of weeks ago, and then our ambient settings. If I expand all these, we'll see most of the default values. Since this is an imperial drawing, everything should be set to feet or inches or the imperial corresponding units. So everything is set up okay. So we'll click on that, and then a couple other things bringing in that template. If I come in and look at some of the styles in here, if I go down to my surfaces, we'll see that that template came in with all of my existing surface styles that we have developed so far, and then the same thing, it has some of our labeling styles also for existing topography. I need to do a little bit more because I'm kind of mixing this drawing up a little bit. I'm going to have some alignment data in here. So we'll come in, we'll see this template did not contain any alignment styles. So what I've done is I've started with the default template, and then what I can do is I can go to the N tools or the NOLTI Civil 3D style library and bring up the style dialog here, web browser, and I can go to my alignments and I can say, okay, I want my proposed centerline style, so I'll drag that off pick an insertion point. It brings a block from the website, inserts it in my drawing, and you'll see now over in the Settings tab, I now have my, I'm looking at the wrong one there. There we go. It panned down. So I now have my proposed centerline alignment style. And usually what I do after I drag and drop it, there is an invisible block here, so I'm just doing E and then L for last, and it'll get rid of that block in my drawing. And I can also go and purge those out. All right, so we've got that one. And I could use some label styles. And I'll bring in my proposed label sets. We'll bring that in, insert it, and then erase last. And I'm not going to do profiles in here. That's probably all I'm going to need for now. So we'll just minimize that if I want to bring that back up later. So we'll see now as I come down here in my label styles, we'll see I have the different label sets for labeling my horizontal alignments. So those are now preset for me. The other thing I'd encourage you to do is before you do any work is besides styles, we can also establish our command settings here. So we have all these different commands available for surfaces. I can set my defaults up here for all surface commands by coming in here and clicking on the Edit Feature Settings. And what I want to do is mainly I just want to make sure that my default styles are set up. So we can see our default surface style is going to be border only. And then our default elevation labels, those are all going to be fine for what I want to do. Let me come down and take a look at that for alignments now. So let me come in and edit feature settings there. And the main reason I'm doing this is when I import from Land Desktop, it doesn't ask me what styles I want to apply. It's going to use whatever my default values are. So I'm going to say for my alignments, as I bring them in, these are all going to be proposed. So I'm going to use my proposed center line. And in my label set, I want to establish that. So we'll come in here and I'm going to use the major minor grid ticks with geometry points. So that'll label PCs and PTs. I'm not going to label any lines or curves or spirals, so I just needed to set those two for now. So I'll go ahead and pick OK to that. So I've preset how I want these objects to be styled and labeled as I bring them into my drawing here. All right, so come to Prospector now. We'll see there are no surfaces, there are no alignments, and there aren't any sites. To bring in from Land Desktop, I'm going to go to the File pull-down menu, and there's a section here for Import where we can go from Land Desktop, Land XML. There's some options here from Google Earth, which I've not used yet, but I'd be curious to see how those work. But interested in right now is the import data from Land Desktop. The way this works is you start at the top and you want to browse to your project's Softdesk folder. Don't expand this and actually select the Softdesk project. This is asking for the folder containing the project. So we want to pick the Softdesk folder for our job. It will then display all of the Land Desktop projects in that folder. You select the one you want. And then you get down below a listing of all the objects that are available to import. And what I usually do is I'll come in and I'll clear everything and then go back in and select explicitly the ones that I want to use. Before I do that though, up above here is if I have sites in my drawing, I can predefine a site to apply the data to. Now alignments I can use none. It'll put them here in the alignment feature group, whereas parcels have to be in a site. So the default is it'll create a site called Site 1. But if I pre-created a site, I can select that as well here. All right, so data now I'm going to bring in my existing surface. And then my alignments, I've got my two main roadway alignments, RD01, RD02. And I'm also going to tell it, hey, while you're doing it, bring in all the different profiles for each of those. You can see those are all checked as well. All right, with all those checked, I pick OK. It will process, gives me a dialog showing me that it was successful. Pick OK, and then we'll zoom extents, and we'll see now that I've got my two alignments with the proper centerline style and stationing and PCPT labels on it, and then I also got my existing surface here with the border-only style applied. So those were brought in from Land Desktop. All right, so let's go back into Prospector now, and we'll see that all these objects are now listed as model objects in Prospector. The alignments are imported and they are no longer tied to our Sofdesk project. And the other thing I want to point out, that as you bring in data from Land Desktop, especially alignments and profiles, they come in as fixed objects. So if I grip edit this and modify it, you'll see that it does not maintain tangency at the PC and the PT. So it is what we call a fixed curve or a fixed line in our alignment. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I get into the alignment and profile portion of today's presentation. The surface, on the other hand, let me go in and look at our surface properties, and if we look at the definition tab, we will see that the operation is called an import legacy tin, but it actually maintains a link back to the tin file in our Land Desktop project. And the neat thing about this is if I edit that surface in Land Desktop, when I open this drawing again, it will have the current version of that surface. So you can actually use the same surface tin file that is being used by people using Land Desktop. And I think, as far as I can tell, that's about the only thing in Civil 3D that maintains a dynamic link back to Land Desktop. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. Let me modify this. Let me switch over to our existing contour style here, just so we can see and quickly see that display. And then the other thing I'll point out is just the layers that were created. And where's my surfaces? Here we go. Here's my surface. Again, it had the suffix on that. You'll see if I turn this layer off, it has no effect on my drawing. You'll see my surface stays visible here. All right, let me turn that back on. But I can freeze it. So if I freeze that layer, we'll see that that surface does go away, even though my existing major and minor contour layers are still toggled on. All right, let me thaw that. All right, so that is how we can bring data in from Land Desktop and start working in Civil 3D. Let me jump back over to my PowerPoint here and go on to the next one. We're now going to look at surface modeling, and what I want to show is the image there on the screen is the prospector with the surface definition branch expanded, and hopefully those of you who've done surfaces in Land Desktop, this should look very familiar to Terrain Model. It should look familiar to Terrain Model Explorer in Land Desktop. The only difference is that we can now bring in data from DEM files in Civil 3D, and then all of our edit commands are here as well. So, but everything else should be familiar to you from the Terrain Model Explorer in Land Desktop. Let me get my cursor back here. There we go. All right. One other thing we're going to look at as we do surface modeling is we can now have curved break lines. Because of figures and feature lines in Civil 3D, they can have three-dimensional arcs in them. Well, how do we convert that to a tin? And one of the things it'll do is it will add additional vertices based on a mid-ordinate distance. So it's going to supplement as it goes around the arc, and it'll calculate those based on what we specify for this mid-ordinate distance value. I got a couple of screen captures I'm going to show you here to kind of demonstrate that. What this is a model of curb and gutter. So here's my two curb feature lines, and here's my lip of gutter. The default mid-ordinate distance in Civil 3D is 1 unit. This is what the triangulation will look like. So a contour coming along here is going to wrap, and instead of going around our curb return, you can see our curb is modeled going across here because this distance right there is 1 foot. I typically set it to 5/100ths of a foot, and that's what the triangulation will look like. So you can see I still get a little deviation from my arc, but it's going to give me a much rounder looking model in my surface than the 1 foot option gave you. Unfortunately, in 2009 Civil 3D, I cannot change the default. That's something they left out. They have added that into 2010, so we can finally set these default values to what we want. All right. Other thing we're going to look at in surface modeling today is going to be contour labels. And contour labels are applied by generating these contour label lines. And then anywhere that label line intersects a contour, you will get a label. And I can actually grip edit and move and stretch these label lines to change how the labels are applied. We can also modify the label properties, which is where we specify what styles are applied to major contours, what styles are applied to minor contours, and also whether or not you see the label line. Okay, we can turn that all on and off, and that's all done through actually the AutoCAD properties dialog. Other thing we're going to see is that the contours themselves are not broken, but they use background mask or wipeouts to hide the contour behind the label. That's the only way you can do this kind of masking, and the thing I really want to stress on that is when you plot, you need to use a PC3 file where the merge pen option has been turned off. If you're using the one with merge pens on, the lines are drawn right through the labels because it merges it right through that wipeout. All right. Because of that, you have to get pretty good at using draw order to make sure all your existing or screened line work is behind your proposed line work, because we used to in the past, we rely on merge pens. The black line merged through a gray line, is black is going to win. Well, that's with that turned off, you're going to get whichever's on top. All right, so that's what we're going to look at. So let's jump back over to my AutoCAD here. And I'm going to open up, I've got a drawing here with some surface data in it. And we'll get my item on the screen here. So I've got a drawing with some points and feature lines. And these are actually brought in from a survey we did a couple years ago doing training on field coding in the Denver office. And what I've done is I stripped out that data set to be just the resulting feature lines or figures from their stringing, which are all the curved lines, and then also the spot elevation points in the drawing. So I've got Kogo points, and I've got all these feature lines. All right, this drawing was also created from the EXTO drawing, so we can come in here and we'll see that we do have all of our surface styles and everything already loaded. All right, so to make my surface, I'm going to right-click on Surfaces, Create New Surface. All right, and this workflow is going to be kind of similar for anything that you can create. Surfaces, there's 4 different types. There's tin and grid surfaces. I would use a grid surface if I'm importing a DEM file. It's going to give me a much smaller model in my drawing because it doesn't have to store coordinate data for every vertice. And then we can also do volume surfaces, is how you calc volumes in Civil 3D. You actually create a volume surface, and it will then, based on the existing and proposed surface that you provided, it will then generate a model of the cut fill elevations. All right, well, I'm going to do a tin surface. The naming from the template is set to default to the Nolte standard of E and then 0102 based on a counter. And you can modify these by clicking on the ellipses button here, and you'll see right now that here's the format. You can have it, well, I guess for surfaces, not a lot of data available for us. You can change the counter style and then also what number and increment that you're using for the counter. All right, so this will be E01. I do recommend putting in a good description. So this is, if I can type today, I'll just call it Field Survey of Driveway. And then the style, the default is to use border only, which I do recommend for large surfaces because you don't want to overwhelm your drawing by drawing lots of contours. So I usually start with border only, but I know this is going to be a pretty small model, so I'm going to go ahead and switch it to my existing 1-foot and 5-foot contours. And the main reason I want to do that is so you can see how the model updates automatically as I add data to it. So let's pick OK to that. So I've actually now created the surface, but it doesn't have any data in it. To add the data, we come in here, we expand the branches, very similar to Terrain Model Explorer, and then you right-click on the data type that you want to add. Well, I'm going to start with our point data, which is available through a point group. So I'm going to add, or right-click on point group, pick Add, and I've only got the one group here called All Points. Pick OK, and as soon as I add that data, you're going to see the contours are generated based on that triangulation. So that is adding our point groups. I also have break line data, so I'm going to use the Add option on that. So I right-clicked on break lines, picking Add, and I do recommend taking the time to give explicit descriptions and selecting break lines either individually or in logical groups. instead of grabbing all of them, we find with real large models it becomes very difficult to go back and edit the model. We do find that break lines from feature lines and figures are still a little unstable in 2009, and by organizing them logically it makes it a little bit easier to go back in and fix drawings that have been corrupted. So let me kind of demonstrate that, the workflow here. So I'm going to do I got 4 different feature types I'm going to do. I've got a retaining wall, I've got my mow band, and then I've got my curb on either side of the road. Is how I'm going to differentiate these. So I'm going to do the wall first, so I just put in the description of wall. They're all going to be standard. That's going to use the XYZ data from the feature line. We can weed out vertices if we want, or we can supplement. So I'm going to make sure I've got data at least every 25 feet, and then we've got that mid-ordinate distance. Again, the default is 1. I can't change that default in 2009, so I'm going to have to edit this every time I use it. My walls are straight segments, so I'm not going to worry about that, but we'll come in here, and let me zoom in. I'll go ahead and grab these 2 feature lines here, hit enter. It adds them to the data, and you can see my triangulation changes automatically as I add the data, and I've now got a wall modeled in my design. And we'll see as I expand the branch here in Prospector, we'll see that that wall now shows up. And if I click on the wall break line group, we'll see that has 2 break lines within it, each one with 4 vertices. So you can see it makes it a little easier to get into and figure out what's going on. We can actually come in here and say zoom to that object, so I can locate these objects in my drawing a lot easier. All right, next one I'm going to add is the mow band here. So let me just go through this as quick as I can here. This one does have arcs, so to get a little bit better triangulation, I'm going to use the 0.05 value. Pick OK to that and grab that, enter, and again you'll see the triangulation updates, and I'll just keep repeating this, and we'll do curb on the west side. Just supplement with 25. This does have arcs, so we'll do 0.05 again. I'll include my sidewalk in that, so I'm going to grab those 3, or actually 4. There's a top and toe curb, and hit return, and we'll see we get real nice triangulation added in where our curb is done. And then we'll do one last one here, and we'll do curb east side. I wasn't equal on my cases, do 25, and again this side does have arcs, so we'll do 0.05 for that one, and we'll grab those. All right, and again our model will update. So real nice organization here, makes it easy to work with. By adding them that way also, I can do some trial and error what-if scenarios here in my surface properties. If I come in here and look at our definition, we'll see each group is a separate line item here. So I can come in here, and let me move this off to the side, and so I'm going to say we'll turn off the wall. Help if you guys can see that. We'll go ahead and I'll turn the wall off, pick OK. It'll ask me, do I want to rebuild? So we'll rebuild, and we'll see there's my surface without the wall. And let's put that back into the model, so I can come back into surface properties, turn that option back on, and then we'll go ahead and rebuild the surface, and it'll add that wall back in. So by organizing them, I can do a lot of different design scenarios with this surface model or with this surface object without having to create dozens of different drawings or models. Other thing I just want to point out on surfaces, the rebuild options here, I typically leave rebuild automatic turned off. I find it slows down my drawing. If any time I touch or change one of the objects that's used to build the model, it's going to rebuild and it slows things down. I will come in when I'm ready and use the rebuild command. So let me kind of demonstrate that a little bit. I can actually model or modify these objects here. So if I grip and pull that feature line over, you'll see it recognizes, hey, this one changed, my break lines changed, the definition changed. So if I come in here and rebuild, you will see it will re-triangulate based on that edit. So the feature lines, the polylines I'm using for break lines are actually part of the surface model. And the reason I want to show that is you don't want to erase it from the drawing because you'll actually erase that data from your surface. All right, let me undo that back to where it goes. And then I'll just quickly rebuild here and make sure everything's okay. All right, moving along, I need to label some contours here, so we'll do that fairly quickly, and I'm going to do it off the surface, add labels, and there's two ways to go. I can either do the surface labels command, or I can jump down and pick the individual label type command here. I'm going to do it through the dialog with this command because I'm not sure what styles I have applied. So I'm going to go add surface labels, and I get this label dialog, and I'll kind of move it off to the side here. So you can see I'm doing surface is the feature type. I want to do contour single. I only want it to label where it intersects, and then I can see which label styles it's going to apply. So that's kind of why I wanted to use the dialog, so I can see my styles are applied for the defaults. And I can pick on the add button, and what I'll do, oops, I did the wrong, not single. Single is a single line. I want to do multiple. There we go. Add, and then draw a line. So contour multiple lets me label multiple by dragging across like that. So you can see I get labels there. I can add again, throw one out here in the roadway, and I can do a couple like that. Other options on here is multiple at interval. We'll add that one in, and we'll just go across that way. And then on my command line, it'll prompt me for the interval, so I'll say maybe throw them in every 50 feet. And you'll see not only do I get labels where it intersects my line, but then every 50 feet it threw in another label. So you can see I've got too many in here, but it's really easy to clean up. I can just erase them. So I can say, well, I don't need those. I can actually grip and drag the line and say, well, let's throw that one on that contour, and I want that one over here on that contour. So I can move these around, or I can grab a grip, pull it across, and have it label multiple contours, or I can come back and drag it back. So a lot we can do, just quickly drag and move, erase, oops, watch your picks there, erase my surface, clean these up a little bit, maybe move that one to there, and then pull it across to get both of those labeled, and I got one more right there, and I'll throw it onto that guy, and again pull it across to get both labeled, and maybe erase those out there. So you kind of get an idea how fairly quickly through the different components of adding either individually or by dragging a line across, I can manipulate these to where I can have my plan labeled how I would like. All right, so let me close that down. Once I've got them in there, well, I want to make some changes. A couple of things. I don't want this line to be visible because it will plot that, and if we click on it, we'll see it is on my surface text layer, which I need because that's the same layer my labels are on. So what I'm going to do is select one of the labels here, and I'm going to go in just the AutoCAD Properties command, and let me bring that into my window here. And we'll see in the properties there's a display contour label line option, and I can change that to false. And what you'll see is it highlights as blue now, so when I hit escape, we'll see that that line no longer shows up in my drawing. If I select one of the labels, I get this blue highlight, then I can still come in and grip at it and modify and change where the labels are located. Okay, but I have to actually select one of them to be able to have the label back in my drawing file, or have the line back. To modify all of them, what I'll do is I'll pick one, right-click, do Select Similar, and you see it found 8 of them, and I'll say take all of them and set that to false. I can also change the styles. Maybe I don't want to see minor labels here. I can also set that to false. Okay, and then when I escape, you'll see it's only now showing the label on my major. Okay, I can bring it all back again, select Similar, and then come in here and say, yeah, I want to see my minors on this one, and those will all reappear. All right, so that's everything for surfaces and contours that I wanted to show right now, and I can see I'm nowhere near going to have enough time, I think, today, so let me get moving along here. Sites is a container for storing and organizing parcels, alignments, and grading objects. 2 ways to use sites. One is to do it by object type, which is the main way I've been working with it, is where I'll create a site for alignments. That way I know my alignments will not interfere with any of my parcels or my grading objects. Same thing, my parcels won't interact with any of my alignments. or you could do it by phase or region in your model, so we can organize it geographically. So I can do a phase 1 and have all the alignments, grading, and parcels for phase 1, same thing for phase 2. With the multi-phase one, you do have to watch because alignments and parcels and grading groups have to have unique names. So in the example I show here, all of my phase 2 parcels I've prefixed with a 02. I can't have a lot 1 up here and a lot 1 down here. Civil 3D won't let me do that. So every element in here does have to have a unique name. All right. Main thing I want to focus on with sites today is that objects in the same site will interact with each other. And let me show you a couple examples of what this is. Alignments and parcels. What I started with here in this picture is I had a rectangular parcel. I drew an alignment across it, and it subdivides the parcel on the alignment. So I ended up with 2 parcels. Well, if I don't want that to happen, I either do my alignments outside of the sites or I do them on a different site. All right. Multiple alignments. Any alignments that define a closed area on the same site will create a parcel. So you're going to see this all the time. When you do alignment modeling, you're going to end up with this parcel label in the middle, and I'm going to do that today, and we'll show you how to get rid of that label. All right. Feature lines are used for grading. They replace 3D polylines. When you intersect feature lines, they put in what's called a split point. And the example I have here is I've got 2 feature lines drawn on different sites. When I add in a third feature line on the same site as this one, it will pull this one down to that elevation and add what's called a split point. And the way these work is the last one edited will control the elevation of the split point, plus we can also do it by style hierarchy. We can actually establish that, you know, objects using style 1 will dictate what the split point elevation is. So you kind of have to watch that behavior, and that also happens when alignments intersect feature lines, and that's usually a problem because my alignments almost always are drawn at 0. They're going to pull that feature line down to 0, and you're going to wonder why you have these strange holes in your surface model. To prevent all this, we do them in separate sites. All right, so let me jump back in real quick. I'll open up another drawing here. And I'm into lesson 3 here, and just real quick I'll show you that I've got some alignments and parcels done on different sites. I've got site 1 and site 2 here, so you can see I've got some alignments and parcel there, and then site 2 has some alignments and parcels there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to real quickly add in alignment. So I'm going to do it by layout. I'm not going to worry so much about the naming here, but I'm going to draw it and make sure I pick. I'm going to do it on site 1. Pick OK, and I'm just going to lay out a tangent. I'm going to draw it across here. And what you'll see is the parcel that was drawn on site 1 was subdivided. So I've now got this parcel 8 and parcel 1, whereas the one that's drawn on site 2, they didn't interact with each other. Okay, same thing with alignments. All right, let me close that down. Let me create another alignment here, and I'm going to put this one on site 1 again. And just draw a tangent across here, and you'll see where this one intersects the alignments that are all on site 1, I now get a parcel in this area. If you don't want to see the label, you can't delete the parcel, but if you don't want to see the label, select it, right-click, and you want to edit the parcel properties, and then you want to go to the Composition tab, and here's where you specify your label style. You can change that to none, and then that label will go away. The parcel is still in my model, so it's this one right here is this parcel number 9. So I can always come back in the properties here, change that back, and have it appear again. All right, last one here, this is my feature lines, and this one will actually, let me go to a 3D view here. Find my model real quick. What you have is I have an alignment, and well, I'm going to split my viewport, but I'm not going to modify this, but I've drawn the alignment through here. This feature line is on the same site, and you'll see that it automatically snapped it down, put in the split point where it intersects the alignment, whereas this feature line is on a different site, and those did not interact with each other. All right. Real quickly, to make a site, is you come in here, sites, right-click, you make a new one, you give it a site name, my site. Not a whole lot you can specify for a site. It's really just you're making that little container in Prospector. All right, all my 3D stuff, yeah, I use the object elevation. And then if I'm going to do automatic numbering, what numbers do I want to start with? And that is about it for sites. So we'll pick on that, and we'll see now I have my site, and it's ready for me to start adding alignments, feature lines, grading objects, and so on. All right, so that's it for sites. Let's jump now to alignments. And really the new thing compared to Land Desktop that Civil 3D brings to the table here is what's called constraint-based design. We saw that when I imported my alignment from Land Desktop, when I grip edited that arc, it did not maintain tangency. Well, those objects are all fixed. Arcs are fixed 3-point arcs, and then line segments are fixed line segments. They're defined by 2 points. When I grip edit those, as my picture shows here, it does not maintain tangency. We also have what are called floating constraints, and a floating object will be tangent to the object on one end, and then you specify some parameters to define the rest of the object geometry. So in this example, I'm showing what happens if you grip edit this point here and move it from side to side. What you'll see is that the arc stays tangent to this segment, and the floating line stays tangent off the end of the arc. This one was done with a radius by specifying the radius and length, and then this our line segment was specified by just the length. So you say it's tangent to this object, and it's 100 feet long. Okay, that's a floating object. The third type of constrained is a free object where it's going to be tangent to the adjacent objects on either side. In this example, I drew a 3-point arc here, I drew a 3-point arc here, and then I applied a free tangent between them. So as I grip edit these arcs, the tangent is going to get longer or shorter depending on which way I stretch it, and it'll maintain the point of tangencies on both arcs as we grip edit this. All right, so let me show you some alignment layout here. All right, so I'm going to open a drawing. And I've got some of my site already laid out. So I'm going back. This is the drawing we started with. I've got my first alignment in here, and I've also got a surface model. I do have some examples that I use to generate those images. So here, say here's the one with the fixed line with the floating arc and the floating tangent on the end. If I grip edit that, you'll see as I move it, it will maintain tangency. All right, we'll go ahead and stretch it. But I can change the radius of my arc, but you'll notice as I change it, it's going to maintain tangency to the first line segment. Okay, I can also grip edit and change the length of my arc, and you'll see it will maintain that tangency and the radius, but I can now change the length. And then the same thing on my line segment. I can't change anything on this one, but the length is all I can modify. All right, so that's kind of showing some of the different components there. Here's one that I did with the tangents, the free line segment on the 2 fixed arcs. So you see as I grip this arc, it's going to maintain tangency, but that line segment is going to get longer and shorter. Okay, a couple other ones on here that are kind of neat. This is a neat way to do curves. Say you've got a fixed object you need to maintain a curve around. You can do your arc by center and radius, and then you can actually float a tangent off each side. And then when I grip edit my arc, you'll see that those 2 line segments, no matter how big or small I drag this arc, those 2 line segments will maintain tangency, and I can actually move my arcs to different locations on here, and they're always going to maintain that tangency to the radius that I've specified. So some neat constraints. I'm not going to show you a whole lot more. I'm not going to show you how to lay these out. I don't have time to do that today. What I'm going to do is just quickly lay out an alignment just to show you some of the tools here for doing alignment layout. And bear with me, I got to go to my handout and make sure I got the right numeric values here for this. All right, to create an alignment, we did it already. We're going to do alignments pull down, and I'm going to do create by layout. You can also generate them from a polyline, but when you do it by polyline, you're going to get fixed entities. So it's really best to use the layout tools because then you can specify the different fixed, floating, and free constraints. All right. Using the default templates, alignment names are going to be RD010203. I can specify a site. All right, I can say none. I'll put this in none. And then my style for the alignment itself, and I can also predefine the labeling so I don't have to draw it and then add labels like you did in Land Desktop. So once you've got it set up, and I'm going to skip this tab here, you can actually apply design criteria which will size your curves for you. All right, that's advanced alignment layout. So I'll pick OK to that, and you're going to get this alignment layout toolbar. So let me move everything down so we can kind of see what's going on. This section here is where you get to all your different constraint-based elements. So you got your default fixed lines, you can do floating lines, and then free line. This one here is where you get to your different curve types, and then they've also got variations for doing different types of spirals as well. Command you're probably going to use the most is going to be this first button on the left end here, where you can just lay out by picking tangent points or the PI points. You can also do that with curves. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do my curve settings here first so we can see what the defaults are. So I'm going to do clothoid. If I do spirals, I'll do clothoid, but here's all the different spiral types you could do. I'm going to leave spirals turned off. I'm just going to do curves, and I'm going to say, hey, my default radius is going to be 300 feet. All right. To lay it out now, I'm going to use the tangent with curves, and I'm going to start somewhere along my alignment here so we can use some of our transparent commands that we looked at a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to start with station offset. And I'm going to select the alignment that I want to calc to, and I'm going to start at station 400 with an offset of 0, and then I'm going to go station 400 again with an offset of 500. And there's my first segment. I'm going to hit escape once because I don't want to do station offset anymore, and I'm going to change it. I'm actually do it by bearing and distance now. So I'm now here, and I'm going to go down in quadrant 2, and my bearing angle is 68 degrees, 6 minutes, 53.9 seconds, which you would type in 68 point, what did I say, 6, so 06539. So that would be read as 68 degrees, 6 minutes, 53.9 seconds. I'll hit enter, and now I just need to specify my length. I'll go like 500 feet. All right, so you see there's my 300-foot curve. I'm going to hit escape once, and then my next point, I'm just going to do a perpendicular O-snap and come back into my alignment here, and then hit enter, and I've got my design done. All right. If I'd have done these on the same site, it would have put a parcel in here, but you can see my first alignment is right here. There's RD01. My second alignment is out here. And actually copy these if I want. I can actually say, you know what, I should have put that on the site. I could move it to the site. You know, say, yeah, take that one, move it to the alignment site, pick OK, and then as soon as I do that, I get my parcel here. Well, I don't want to see a label, so I can edit my parcel properties, change that to none for the labels, and I no longer see that. All right, these are now dynamic. I can grip edit them and modify that. So we'll go ahead and highlight grips, and you get different grips on your alignment. I can move my tangent segments, so you'll see as I move my fixed tangent segment, it recalcs those curves for me on the fly. The curves are free. All right, so if I grab my PI point here and stretch it, you'll see the curve lengths gets longer and shorter based on how I pull it. I can also modify the radius of my curve, and I can either use these circular grips here to stretch and make my radius smaller, or I can pull it this way and make it longer. I can grab the middle grip here, change it, or I can use this little arrow grip here, and I can pull my radius in and out that way, maintaining the PI point. One thing that's kind of neat with this is if I go in and edit my style here, where's my alignment style? They have this design tab in alignment styles where I can say set a radius snap, and I say keep it on, say, 50-foot increments. Well, now when I grip edit this, you'll see it jumps in 50-foot increments. Okay, so instead of having this freeform, so there's 300, if I want 350, I just pull it over one click, and I now have a 350-foot radius arc just by grip editing. All right, so pretty neat stuff that I can do with those. Let me jump over and quickly do the profile on this, and we'll probably go just a couple minutes long here. I've got I've gone 56, so I got about 4 minutes here. So profiles now, we're going to start off with our alignment. We're going to create a profile from our surface model. All right, so we come in here, you can either select the alignment from a list. If you got a whole bunch, I can use a little pick button here, come into my drawing and say, I want that alignment, so that's RD02. I want that surface, and I'm going to add the profile. If I have multiple surfaces, I can keep picking and then keep adding them. All right. You can also specify a range of stations to sample. So maybe I only want to see this surface profile for a portion of my alignment. I can actually sample specific stations. Down below, I can modify some of the parameters for that profile. I can change it from dynamic to static, and what we'll see is a dynamic surface profile will update if the alignment or the surface changes. So I'm going to leave that on dynamic. I'm going to apply a style to it. I'm going to say we'll use my existing grade profile style. All right. If I pick OK, I'm done. It creates the profile. I just don't see it anywhere, so I'm going to jump over and actually use this button here to draw in a profile view, which will bring up the Create Profile View command, which I can also get to from the profile menu. Again, we start off similar process, which alignment. I can give my profile view a name. I don't use the name for anything at this point, so I'm just taking their defaults. I do need to specify a view style, which we'll look at in a moment. I've got two in this drawing, a 10-to-1 exaggeration and a 10-to-1 here and a 5-to-1 here. Okay, so let's start with the 50 by 5. All right. We'll go next. What range of stations do I want to see in my profile view? You can actually break these up by viewport. All right, so I can have 20 views for each profile with different station ranges. All right, we'll go next. I can specify the height I want for my profile view. Okay, automatic, it's just going to kind of center it within it based on the viewport style, or the profile view style. We can also do split profiles. I have to do user specified, where I can split it, where we can shift the datum for different regions. All right, that's more advanced, so we'll leave that turned off. On my profile display, I can turn on and off which profiles we're going to see. And one of the things I have to set in this screen that wasn't in the sample profile screen is what label style to apply. And there is an EG style in the Nolte templates that does not label anything. You don't want to label all the tangent segments on your existing profile. Click along, and the last thing I can add in are what's called the band set. And I've got some sets made that will label profile elevations along the bottom here. All right, and right now I'm assigned, I've only got one profile, so that I'm using the E01 surface profile on all of them. I will create the view, and we'll just plop it in our drawing here. All right, so there's our profile view. Using our style, all of the layer names are standard Nolte layers, so if I don't want minor grids, I'm going to click that, freeze that layer so we can turn it off, so we can see a little bit better here. Unlike Land Desktop, if you don't like where you put it, you can do that. You can move it around. I can make copies of it. Yep, there we go. And I can have two views of the same profile. I do need to modify this one and tell it which profiles to display. There we go. All right, and they are both going to show the same thing. I can change the lengths and whatnot. I can change the style. Oop. Well, I can do it through here. Nope, it won't let me do it through here. All right, let me pick one, and profile view properties. I can say instead of 50 by 5, I want to see 50 by 10 on that one. Okay, so I can have different scale exaggerations on different profiles in the same drawing. So a lot we couldn't do in Land Desktop that we can now do in Civil 3D. Make this a little bit easier. I'm going to change my scale to 20, and you'll see all the heights and everything adjust, and there's the bands that were created along the bottom. Okay. To show that this is dynamic, let me come in. I'm going to leave it kind of small here. And I'm going to grip edit. I'm going to make my, oops, I got the labels. There we go. And I'm going to make my alignment longer. And what you'll see as I grip edit this alignment, my profile view updates automatically to show that the change. Okay, and you don't want to do this too much, especially if you've done a lot of profile design, because what happens is if I change the length of the alignment, my profile design may shift a little bit. All right. Well, let me finish this off. I'm going to throw in just a profile by layout here just to show you those tools. So create by layout. And you need to pick which view you want to work in. So I'm just going to select on the grid here. Profile name, I don't like this style here, so actually I'm going to do it with alignment name. I'm going to insert that, and I'm going to do -FG is what I want to use. So it's going to use alignment name, finish grade, and then I can apply styles. So I get a finish grade style and a finish grade label set that's going to label all my tangents and curves. All right. Toolbar is almost identical to the alignment layout tools. I've got my left button here, which is the quick draw tangents by pick PVIs. I can also throw curves in, and then they've also got buttons here where I can draw fixed or floating or free tangents and curves. So we have the same constraint-based type of design with profiles that we have for alignments. All right, let me just rough this in real quickly. Let me check my curves. So I'm going to do 200-foot curve lengths. And we'll come in here and I'll draw tangents with curves. And we can use things like object snaps. So I can say start at end point here. We can also use our transparent commands. And they've got commands here for profiles where I can do it by station offset, station grade. I can do length and grade. So maybe I'll try grade and station here. So I need to tell which view I'm working in. And I'm going to say, well, let's come down at -2. And let me figure out what station I want to go to. Let's go to about 200. All right, and then I'll change my grade to 1, and I'll go to station 1000 and throw that one in. You can see there's my first curve, and we'll come down, and I'll hit escape once, and then maybe we'll throw one down here, and then we'll come back up here, and we'll snap it to the end there, and then hit enter, and it'll automatically label it. Okay, so there's my curve labels. These curves here were kind of short. Grip editing on a profile, I've got PI grips where I can stretch and move this PI any way I want, or I can grab these grips on either side and I can hold a grade and stretch it that way. Or I can grab this one and hold the grade and stretch it that way. I can also grip edit and use the transparent commands where I can pick on this and then come in and use my station elevation transparent command, actually specify exactly what station and elevation I want that at. All right, well, let's flatten this out a little bit. Let me throw a curve in here. I'm going to do a free vertical curve with the parameter, which will be length. And I'm going to say I'm going to go from that one to that one there, and I'll do a curve length of, we'll do 100. Okay, and then we'll go from there to there, and I'll do another one of 100. And then hit return, and it'll add in the labels for me. The labels that I've done in this style are all individual pieces, but I can grip edit and stretch things around. And the neat thing about this is if we move these around, come on, there we go. Put my low point there. If I grip edit my alignment, they will keep their same relative locations, so you don't have to go back in and re-manipulate your labels like you did in the land desktop. All right, I went a few minutes over. I apologize for that. Again, I get a little ambitious on how much material I can cover. Hopefully, I see a few questions on there. Boys, I hope. Oh, Corwin, you said you did figure out how to get it to show up. That's great. I will answer the questions afterwards. I'll email those to you. I do appreciate you guys taking the time to sit in with me today to watch this stuff. Hopefully you learned a little bit. Hopefully you're getting a little comfort with Civil 3D that you can go in and start doing some of this stuff on your own. I do encourage questions, so if you get into this and you get a little stumped or I didn't quite cover enough material for you, feel free, send me an email, give me a call, give me a communicator chat. Even better, use the AutoCAD forum, and there's a discussion group for Civil 3D questions. So if I'm not available, there are several other people in the company now very well versed in some of this functionality that they can answer your questions as well. So again, thank you for watching today's session, and goodbye.